Right, so I've been absolutely obsessed with episode 7 lately, and there's this one scene that I completely glossed over the first time I watched it. You know the one with the globe? Yeah, that one. And honestly, the more I've thought about it, the more convinced I am that we've just been handed the answer to what actually went down between Jax and his mates before they abstracted. Everyone's been trying to work out Jax's backstory since the show started, haven't they? Like, what's his deal with Kaufmo and Ribbit? Why is he such a mess? But I reckon episode 7 might have just given us proper evidence that points to something way more specific than just he lost his friends and got depressed about it. So here's what I think happened. Jax's friends were actually trying to escape the circus, and he flat out refused to help them. And that decision? That's what tore their friendship apart, and possibly even led to their abstractions. Let's start with the obvious stuff. We finally got a proper look inside Jax's room, and it's basically a memorial to his abstracted friend. There are these photos scattered around showing him with Kaufmo and Ribbit, and they all look genuinely happy, like they were properly close. You can see this little setup with 3 chairs around a table, which suggests they had their own private spot where they'd hang out away from everyone else. Then there's that mysterious orb showing a snowy cabin scene with these muffled voices having an argument. And we know from the voice credits that one of those voices belongs to Ribbit. When Pomni asks Jax if he's all right, he just says, "I'm great."
Hey, you all right?
I'm great.
But you can tell something's off. Now, the audio's pretty difficult to make out, but if you really listen carefully, it sounds like someone saying, "You were my best friend." Notice the past tense there? That could have been the exact moment their friendship ended. Here's where everything starts connecting. Remember what we saw in Kaufmo's room back in episode 1? All those scribbled drawings and writings covering the walls, showing he was completely fixated on finding an exit. There's even this specific drawing of Kane catching him mid-escape, which suggests Kaufmo actually tried to get out at some point and Kane stopped him. So if Kaufmo was that obsessed with finding the exit, and he spent loads of time with Ribbit and Jax, then obviously he would have told them about his plans, right? And Ribbit probably joined in helping him investigate because that's what close mates do. They support each other's goals, even the mad ones. I think that snowy cabin adventure was when they finally found something real, some actual clue or weakness in the circus they could exploit to escape. And that's when they approached Jax about it, probably expecting him to be buzzing that they'd finally worked out a way to leave. But Jax didn't want to leave. This is where things get interesting. If Jax genuinely did something awful in the real world, maybe he was involved in a car accident, or maybe he came from a really abusive home situation, then going back to reality means facing consequences that might be worse than being stuck in the circus. So when Kaufmo and Ribbit told him about their escape plan during that snowy cabin adventure, Jax refused to help. And that's what the argument was about. From Ribbit's perspective, this must have felt like betrayal, like Jax was choosing to stay with Kane rather than escape with his friends. And that's when she said, "You were my best friend," past tense, because she couldn't understand why he was giving up on them. But Kaufmo and Ribbit didn't give up just because Jax wouldn't help. They kept investigating, kept searching for the exit without him. And we know from Jax himself that right before people abstract, they become really insufferable to be around. At first, that sounds like he's just describing depression or mental deterioration, doesn't it? But what if he's actually describing what it was like watching his 2 best friends become increasingly obsessed and desperate about escaping? If Kaufmo and Ribbit kept pushing harder and harder to find the exit after Jax refused to help them, if they kept trying to convince him to change his mind, or constantly talked about their plans, then yeah, from Jax's perspective, they probably did become insufferable. Not because they were losing their minds, but because every single conversation with them was a reminder that he'd chosen his own fear over their friendship. And that obsession is exactly what got them caught. We know from that drawing that Kane eventually Kaufmo trying to escape, and probably Ribbit too, since they were working together. Throughout the series, we've seen that characters who ask too many questions and push too hard against the system are the ones who tend to abstract. So if Kaufmo and Ribbit were actively trying to escape, Kane would have seen them as threats that needed to be eliminated. Maybe abstraction isn't just what happens when someone goes mad. Maybe it's what happens when Kane decides someone's too dangerous to keep around in their normal state. And Jax had to watch both his best friends slowly deteriorate and lose their minds, knowing it was happening because they tried to do something he'd refused to help them with. This makes Jax's behavior after their abstractions make so much more sense. In episode 2, he didn't attend Kaufmo's funeral. And when Pomni called him out on that in episode 6, he said he doesn't go to anyone's funerals. Which at first sounds like typical Jax being cruel, right? But think about it. How could he possibly stand there at Kaufmo's funeral and pretend to mourn when he knows he let Kaufmo down when it mattered most? And it's not just Kaufmo's funeral he skipped. He said he doesn't go to anyone's funerals, which means he didn't go to Ribbit's either. Probably not Queenie's or any of the other abstracted characters either. Attending a funeral means publicly acknowledging that you cared about someone. And Jax can't do that anymore, because caring about people is what led to Kaufmo and Ribbit dying while he stood by and did nothing. So instead, he became cruel. Cruelty's easier than guilt. Being a villain is easier than being the coward who let his friends die alone. And if you convince yourself that nothing matters and everyone's just a cartoon character, then maybe you don't have to think about how you failed the two people who mattered most to you. But here's the thing. Jax kept those photos in his room. He created this private shrine that only he can see. That proves he does care. If he really didn't care about anyone, he wouldn't keep torturing himself with reminders of what he lost. He wouldn't skip funerals because he can't handle the guilt. He just wouldn't show up because he genuinely didn't care. When we see Jax looking at that photo of the three of them together, he starts having this psychedelic, reality-breaking experience where Ribbit's hand reaches out toward him. And that's exactly what abstraction looks like from the inside. Which means Jax was starting to abstract himself, probably because he's been carrying this guilt and these memories for so long that it's finally catching up to him. And then when Abel told Pomni he knew the way out and the circus members decided to attempt an escape, Jax actually went with them. Which is massive when you think about it, because this is the same bloke who refused to help Kaufmo and Ribbit escape. And now suddenly he's participating in another escape attempt. Maybe that's because he almost abstracted right before Pomni knocked on his door. We saw him having that reality-breaking experience with Ribbit's hand reaching out. Maybe in that moment, he realized he's abstracting anyway, so what's the point of staying? Or maybe seeing Ribbit again reminded him of what he lost by refusing to help them, and he didn't want to make that same mistake twice. But when they finally got to those buttons and had to choose between red and blue, but Jax was the one who pushed the red button, the one that kept them all in the circus. Yeah, Kane quickly said they chose wisely, because the blue button would have taken them to Shrimp City or whatever. But we've got no idea if that's actually true, or if Kane was just covering for the fact that they almost escaped. The fact that Jax pushed the red button, that he chose to keep everyone in the circus when he had the option to let them out, that feels significant. We know Kaufmo abstracted after Ribbit did, which means they weren't together when abstraction happened. Maybe during their escape attempt, something went wrong and they got separated. Maybe Ribbit tried to go first and got caught by Kane immediately. Or maybe whatever exit they found was actually a trap that triggered her abstraction the moment she tried to use it. And then Kaufmo abstracted later, and Jax lost another friend. If Jax has already watched both his friends die trying to escape, then him pushing the red button in episode 7 makes perfect sense. He knows from experience that trying to escape just gets people abstracted, and he's not willing to watch that happen again to Pomni or anyone else, even if it means staying trapped forever. So yeah, I reckon the snowy cabin adventure was when Kaufmo and Ribbit finally told Jax about their escape plan after finding some actual way to leave the circus. Jax refused to help them because he was too afraid of going back to whatever terrible situation he came from in the real world. That refusal ended their friendship completely. They tried to escape without him. Kane caught them, and their abstractions followed. Now Jax is living with the guilt of knowing that if he'd helped them, maybe together they could have succeeded. Or maybe he could have at least been there for them when everything went wrong. And that's why he couldn't attend their funerals. That's why he pushed the red button in episode 7, because he knows exactly what happens when you try to leave. Anyway, I'd love to know what you reckon about all this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe. Cheers for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.